just watched the Republican debate, having just reported on it for international television. And I'm sitting here and I am ready to talk to all of you tonight. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad that you're here. So glad that you're here. This is just a quick, off the cuff, late night live stream. Just thought I would just hop on and react to what we just watched. I don't know how many of you actually just watched that debate. It was something, wasn't it? We all know the biggest thing is that the main candidate, who's leading in all the polls among Republicans, wasn't even there. Donald Trump wasn't watching, wasn't there. Donald Trump's interview that he did with Tucker Carlson, that interview actually went up to 80 million views while the debate was going on, meaning that Republicans and the audience, people were paying attention to that. They weren't paying attention to the actual Republican debate, which is certainly saying something. But wow, I will say the whole time I was watching it, I just got a feeling that it was staged. I'm just being honest with you all. I felt that that fight between Chris Christie and Vivek Ramaswamy was staged. I felt they'd both rehearsed their lines. There were many, many moments in the debate I thought, that seems a little bit too perfect. This doesn't seem natural to me. This seems like people have practiced their lines. I hate to be conspiratorial like that, but Vivek Ramaswamy, smooth, and it was clearly this whole debate was designed for him to get center stage. I mean he was in the literal center of the stage. The audience was on his side overwhelmingly. When he said things, they applauded for him. Vivek Ramaswamy seemed to have pulled his gesturing style from Barack Obama. That is very clear. Very clear. The way he was moving his hands and that was, he's practiced, he's gotten a lot of Obama training. That's pretty clear. Ramaswamy stole the show overwhelmingly. And he's doing the thing that Donald Trump did, which is that Donald Trump, he captured the energy of various dissident circles. He's on there. They're calling him out because he says we don't need to support Israel. What's the point of that? He's saying we don't need weapons to Ukraine. He's saying a lot of anti-war sounding things. He's also demonizing China, speaking against China. I would say Vivek Ramaswamy was the clear winner. The clear winner was Donald Trump, who didn't attend. But after Trump, Vivek Ramaswamy. Ron DeSantis bombed epically, right? That guy was supposed to be this big Republican. He looked tired. He looked uninteresting. He looked boring. When he started speaking, you almost went to sleep. Ron DeSantis, I think this is, Ron DeSantis, not liking it. Not liking it. Now, Nikki Haley was obnoxious, very obnoxious, but they were really giving her a prominent position. She's been vetted by all the right circles. And I believe that she and Mike Pence were both kind of holding down the fort for neoconservatism. They were both kind of on the stage as the representatives of the foreign policy establishment and of Israel. And they were both on the stage making it clear why, that is still a big factor in the Republican Party, even though the neoconservative experiment ultimately failed. In the Bush years, that was the end of neoconservatism. That worldview and the economic interests there and the foreign policy circles, the old Sovietologists, the Leo Strauss, Irving Kristol crowd, they still have a lot of influence in the Republican Party, even if they're not, even if your average Republican doesn't think that way anymore, even if, the public relations messaging, Mike Pence and Nikki Haley, they still represent a big section of the American deep state, right? A big section of the U.S. intelligence apparatus, a big section of the FBI, a big section of the military brass still think in that neocon way. Even though, we saw kind of a resurgence of that Jimmy Carter soft power faction, Even though there was kind of a surge in the synthetic left and the liberal CIA under the Obama administration and continuing into the Trump administration, and that they seem to have the upper hand in a lot of ways. The neocons still exist, and the fringe right is not completely where, that even though the majority of Republicans now think like fringe rightists, right? They don't control the Republican Party's apparatus, and they don't control the money. They don't control the, Fox News. I don't know if you saw, but Marjorie Taylor Greene, during the debate, she tweeted out that Nikki Haley is the most dangerous candidate of all of them on the stage. She would start World War III. And then she talked about how Marjorie Taylor Greene and other MAGA people, other Trump supporters, were locked out of the spin room. They were not allowed. They're not allowed to be part of the post-debate discussion. I don't know if you saw that. Fox News locked out Marjorie Taylor Greene and all Trump supporters. They were all escorted out of the Fox News area. They will not be allowed on the air to give commentary after the debate. That's big. That's very, very big. Very, very big. And, I don't know. I put what I saw on the stage coming out of the mouth of Vivek Ramaswamy. I put that in the context, I put that in the context of what I heard. Weird things happening. I'm doing this on my phone, so I haven't done it on my phone this way for a while. I put what I saw tonight in the context of the RFK campaign, in the context of the Cornel West campaign, and it seems like the establishment has kind of decided that the mistake that they made in 2016 was they allowed Donald Trump to be the lightning rod that absorbed all anti-establishment energy. And that's why Donald Trump won in 2016, is that he became anybody who was against the status quo for any reason. Anti-war, 9/11 truth, libertarian, didn't like political correctness, whatever. Everybody who didn't want the status quo voted for Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton was the status quo. She was like the walking incarnation of the obnoxious status quo. She didn't even bother to campaign because she just assumed she would win because it was so rigged in her favor. And Donald Trump, he just, he started it. You'll remember in 2016 during that election. And I remember it because that was my first year at RT and I covered it excessively. Donald Trump started talking like everybody, right? He was, he sounded at one point he was saying he was going to restore Glass-Steagall, he was going to cancel student debt. At another point he was talking out of 12 sides of his mouth, and it was just kind of like, I don't like the establishment. I'm making politics sexy again. I got big flames coming out of the ground at my rallies, and CNN and the news hate me, and it worked. So I feel like right now, right, they want anti-establishment voices to run in many different directions, right? So you got Vivek Ramaswamy, you got RFK, you got Cornel West, you got Marianne Williamson, kind of, and they're trying, the only way, and they've even got the No Labels campaign. Did you hear about this? There's going to be the No Labels. Did you hear about this? That Joe Manchin might be running for president as the No Labels candidate, and they want this election to be a circus because that is the only way that Kamala Harris can ever become president of the United States. Joe Biden is old and fragile, and Kamala Harris, they have programmed her psychologically. They have manipulated her. They know exactly how to push their buttons. They want Kamala Harris. She is the Hillary Clinton State Department. She is the candidate of Silicon Valley fascism. But they know that if it gets down to a two-person race between somebody who's not Joe Biden and not Kamala Harris, and Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, that other person will win. So they want to turn this election into a circus. I am convinced they want to turn this election into a circus. Into an absolute circus in order to secure the coronation of Kamala Harris. That is how it looks to me, because, one thing I will say is that Vivek Ramaswamy, he said a lot of things on stage, but then he framed them all as if he did not mean them. And that is very strange, right? I mean, he said he didn't want to send weapons to Ukraine and that it wasn't in America's interest. Great. He said that we should, but we should really focus on fighting China. At one point, Mike Pence called Vladimir Putin a communist. He's a communist. Mike Pence thinks he's in a cowboy movie, right? I'm Mike Pence, and I'm a cowboy. This town ain't big enough for both of us. Go ahead, make my day. I'm Mike Pence. Mike Pence. I mean, the guy's like he walked out of a fucking cowboy movie, right? Mike Pence. He was a radio host in Indiana. That's what he was. That's his background. He's a radio host from Indiana. And as a radio host in Indiana, he had this radio program. He was this religious, evangelical Christian guy who had a radio program who bashing Obama that was very popular. I just don't like Barack Obama, and I'm a Christian conservative, and I don't much like Barack Obama. Not a good guy, but I'm a big, strong man, and so I don't much care for Barack Obama. That's Mike Pence, right? I mean, he's trying to sound like, like some kind of scary cowboy movie or something. Like some kind of it's like Clint Eastwood who lives across the street from his neighbors and is like, the neighbors are walking by. Hey, neighbor, you ever want to come see my new firearm? I can show it to you. I just bought a huge gun. Did I ever tell you about Nam, kid? I fought in Nam. I killed me lots of communists in Nam. I'm Mike Pence. It's like some kind of like scary old man or something. Some kind of like scary old cowboy man. That's what Mike Pence sounds like. And that fits the whole neocon thing, right? We all know about Leo Strauss, right? The godfather, the intellectual father of neoconservatism. His favorite television program was Gunsmoke. And he told his followers that Americans should come to understand politics as if it is an episode of Gunsmoke. And as the neocons, who were, Leo Strauss's intellectual children, they brought us Ronald Reagan, a literal cowboy actor, as president. And they also brought us George W. Bush, who's from Connecticut. But I talk like this. Even though I'm from Connecticut, because I go out and I take out brush on my ranch, because I'm a cowboy, see. I got to defeat Al-Qaeda. I am the good doer against the evil doer. And I am the decision maker decider. I'm the decider man. That's what I am. We're going to smoke him out. Right? I mean, it was George W. Bush. This is a guy from Connecticut, or a wealthy kid from Connecticut, but he played up this whole cowboy persona, right? And so, the neocons, it makes sense that if Mike Pence is a neocon, now he's a bit of a different kind of neocon. And thank you, Lionel, by the way, for the super chat. Keep it up, Caleb. Sure, yeah, we got to keep going, right? He's a little bit of a different kind of neocon than Reagan was, right? Reagan, Nancy, it was a little bit of a different persona, but Mike Pence is a little deeper. Mike Pence is a little more Clint Eastwood, but it fits that whole neocon strategy, right? This idea that you're gonna sound like a cowboy. And the thing is, people don't watch cowboy movies anymore, right? I mean, cowboy movies are dead as a genre. They just don't happen anymore. Cowboy movies, Wild West literature. This is really interesting. Wild West literature, right? The actual Wild West period was very short, right? From like the end of the Civil War until like 1880s. We're talking like maybe 20, 30 years, right? There was a brief period where they were settling the West and the Civil War was over. And in Germany, of all places, I don't know if you know this, in Germany, there started to be popular novels about the American West. Right? There was a tiny, the whole Wyatt Earp thing, it was like a tiny little incident, the showdown at the OK Corral or whatever. That was like a tiny little incident. And then there was this former Confederate guy, this former Confederate insurgent, Jesse James. And it kind of became like a type of novel that was popular in Germany, of all places. And then as movies started to be popular in the 1920s, the 1930s, you got them, but it was really post-World War II that cowboy movies became a thing. My Darling Clementine, that was a big hit. It was supposedly Harry Truman's favorite movie. And that post-World War II America, 50s and 60s, cowboy movies were everything. The Magnificent Seven, High Noon, The Hour of the Gun, there was just so many of them, so many of them. And so the psychology of Americans, and Gunsmoke and Paint Your Wagon and all of that, the psychology of boomer Americans, kids who grew up in the 50s and 60s, is very much they like cowboys, right? And so when Leo Strauss is telling his students, that we gotta make politics sound like a cowboy movie, he's saying we have to do it in a way that'll be, mass propaganda for a generation that's grown up watching television. That's what that's about. And so it fits that Mike Pence, as a neoconservative, would adopt a cowboy persona. I don't know how well that's going to work, though, because nowadays, even, no matter how conservative, people still aren't watching cowboy movies. I think the last big cowboy movie that I can recall was Tombstone. That came out when I was a kid in the 90s, and that was a big movie. But anyway, we're talking about Republican debates. Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley is crazy, right? Nikki Haley is stupid and crazy, okay? And I was a reporter at the UN when she was the U.S. ambassador. I was in the same room, breathed the same air as her. She's a nut job. Right? She did a press conference when she was, doing her debut UN General Assembly. She did a press conference, right? And she's answering questions, and she reads them all like, I am a hostage. I am a hostage. She reads them all as if she's been taken hostage by terrorists, and she's reading her ransom note. If you bring $50 to this spot tomorrow, I will not be executed by the terrorists who are holding me. She looks like a hostage, a hostage reading a statement, in a tape every time she speaks. And she speaks like this. I am reading my lines, and I know more about Nikki Haley than I want to, right? Right after my wife and I got married, we went on a little honeymoon to her home state of South Carolina when she was the governor, right? Romantic, I know. We went to the beach, South Carolina. We enjoyed ourselves. We had just gotten married. At that point in 2014, Nikki Haley was running for re-election as governor of South Carolina. And I absolutely won't forget the TV ad that I saw on television for Nikki Haley during that election, in which there was a teenage girl. And this ad, I have found it on YouTube. It exists. It is weird as hell. It's one of the wacky ads I've ever seen. This teenage girl, this blonde teenage girl, is standing with her mom. I was going to commit suicide, so I decided to write a letter to the governor. And then it cuts to Nikki Haley. I called that girl up on the phone and told her to not let those kids at school bully her and hold her head up high. And it cuts back to her. Nikki Haley saved my life. That was the ad. And I look at that ad and I'm just like, this is so wacky. First of all, who does that, right? People commit suicide. It's very tragic and very awful. But when one is going to commit suicide, does one write a letter to the governor of their state? Is that what people do? Mariah, you're named after Paint Your Wagon. That is, Mariah, I must be honest with you. You never want to say anything about anyone's name. You just don't do that, right? I've learned that is a huge faux pas, right? So if I ever have a thought reaction when I hear someone's name, right, I just kill it because no one likes to hear it. But now you brought it up, right? You're named Mariah because of Paint Your Wagon. And there have been many times I've seen your name come by, and there's something that goes off in my head, and I've started thinking, And they call the wind Mariah. But I've made a point of not saying that because you don't say things about people's names. But now apparently I had the right instinct. That was your parents' intention. I know that song, right? That's a hit song from the musical Paint Your Wagon. It became like a hit like folk song in the early 60s that I just knew because my family liked folk music. They call the wind Mariah. So I feel validated in my weird association with your name, Mariah. I feel better. But the deep state is 100% behind Vivek Ramaswamy because DeSantis is a disaster. And you were absolutely right. Uh, uh, I mean, DeSantis looked tired. I thought this guy's the front runner after Trump. This guy's supposed to be the top tier candidate after Trump, and he's on there and he's just boring. I don't like teachers' unions. I require people. I think everyone who goes to high school should take a citizenship test. Blah, 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 blah. That's what I heard. That's what I heard. It was just, it was like boring. It was boring. It was uninteresting. And like this guy's supposed to be so fiery, anti-woke, and he's passing all these exciting anti-communist laws. He's up there. I served in the military after 9/11. I fought in Iraq. He was just so boring. I'm so boring. Ron DeSantis epically bombed tonight. He epically bombed, right? It was, Vivek Ramaswamy. They gave him. It had a very staged quality to it, and I keep coming back to that. Because there were just so many. When they cut to Chris Christie. And he's like, wow, I get the UFO question? It was like, he knew he was going to get the UFO question. That was a planned answer. That was so staged. The fighting, so much of it seemed very, very, very staged. And a lot of the things, Vivek Ramaswamy, the Israel thing, like, again, if he was really anti-Israel, he would have, like, more talking points around that lined up. He didn't. It's almost like he was just dog whistling. And that's what I get from Ramaswamy. He's trying to do what Trump did and capture anti-establishment energy, but his heart isn't in it, right? If Vivek Ramaswamy were really anti-Israel, he would defend that position. He would have more to say about it. He didn't. If he was really critical of U.S. weapons to Ukraine, again, he would say more about it. He didn't. Now, one moment in the debate that I just thought was, it was one of those, like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Nikki Haley announces, right? Russian President Putin killed Prigozhin. Based on what? Right? Oh, okay. And then she says, and when I was UN ambassador, the Russian ambassador to the UN mysteriously died, as if Putin killed Vitaly Churkin. Like, well, first of all, she wasn't yet the UN ambassador when Churkin died. Obama was still the president. It was as Obama was leaving office. I remember that. I met Vitaly Churkin on many occasions. And it was very mysterious how he suddenly died. And for her to blame that on Putin, no, the way it looked almost like the American government killed the guy. We have no way. He had a heart attack, right? It was very oddly timed. But Trump had just gotten elected president of the United States. Obama was mad about it. Obama was putting sanctions on Russia for allegedly meddling. It was the height of anti-Russian. And then all of a sudden, we hear that Churkin's at the hospital and Churkin's dead. And it looked really mysterious. It looked really, really mysterious to all of us. But nobody thought that Putin killed him because that guy was really good at his job. Like, Putin would be, why would Putin kill Vitaly Churkin? That's like the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, it would not be in Putin's interest to kill one of his top and most experienced diplomats. That guy Churkin, he knew how to handle the press. He was very good at his job. He was very, very good at his job. He had an amazing sense of humor. That guy had been a diplomat since back in like the 80s. He had had kind of soared as a diplomat. He had a certain charisma about him. He knew how to charm the press and stuff. I mean, so I mean that for her to say that, to just get up there and to claim that Putin killed Vitaly Churkin with no evidence to back it up, just like with Prigozhin, right? There was a plane crash. I mean, unless you have evidence to the contrary, and it just shows that as long as it's Putin, as long as it's Russia, you can say whatever you want in American media. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to back up anything you say with facts or claims. Who needs facts? Who needs claims? All you have to do is what, or you say, you could say, Putin broke into my house last night and stole my all of my grandmother's jewelry. And you say, so Putin came to the United States. What? Are you defending Putin? Oh, you believe Putin when he says he didn't do it? Oh, we got a Putin puppet here, I mean, it's like you can blame Putin for anything. You can say anything about Putin. Anything you want about Putin. And it's like, and I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, and it's absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, to just see that, and it's infuriating to watch. And that's what makes me feel like Vivek Ramaswamy is not sincere, because his pushing back was weird. He wanted to get credit for saying anti-establishment things about Ukraine and about Israel, but he didn't have any facts to back them up. His heart wasn't really in it. He was trying to get credit for saying it, right? He's into the whole, like, libertarian, middle class, work hard, shrink the government. He's into that. His heart is definitely in that. Doesn't mean he wasn't rehearsed, but he's practiced all the Obama gestures. He was doing all kinds of Obama-style gesturing, yeah, I mean, they handed him the show. I mean, the audience, the applause, and the boos were all for him. They were all for him, Pence in particular, Pence was on that stage to represent the neoconservative wing of the party, but I feel like Pence was not favored, right? The audience didn't really like Pence. Haley was much more appreciated than Pence. Pence was just, that audience had no use for Pence. At one point, I will say that Ron DeSantis actually made a very good point, which is, he said, if we keep refighting and relitigating January 6th, that's exactly what the Democrats want to do. They just want to make January 6th go on forever. That's a very good point, right? And that was one of the best points made on the stage, is when they started having an argument about January 6th, when they started having an argument about whether Donald Trump had committed a crime or anything, and Chris Christie did his whole thing about, I don't know if it was criminal, but it was immoral, it was not presidential, blah, 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 and then Ron DeSantis just said, this is exactly what the Democrats want us. They want us to just talk about January 6th forever. And that is absolutely true. The Democrats do want to talk about January 6th forever. They want to have the January 6th trials go on for the next millennium. They will never stop talking about it. And they won't talk about how they made it happen. They won't talk about how the FBI, won't say it didn't have agents who made it happen. They won't talk about all the revelations. They won't talk about Ray Epps. They won't talk about any of this. But they will talk about, they just want to talk about how awful it was. Oh my God, it was awful. And they're getting ready for a big trial of Donald Trump. Oh, well, it's going to be awful. And yeah, this is really something. But yeah, what Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted out about how MAGA Republicans were basically locked out of Fox News tonight, that takes the cake. That takes the cake. And that, it's very interesting, because it's like Republican circles are turning into what the Democrats used to be, right? The Democrats during the Bush years kind of became a catch-all for anyone who was against the establishment, right? There were, you'd go to rallies against the war, you'd go to Democrat, events or whatever, there'd be libertarians there, there would be, hard left socialist types there, there'd be very, very mainstream kind of people there. It was just anyone who was kind of at odds with Bush, was in the Democrat circle because they were against the establishment. Well, that's kind of what the Republican circles are now. Right, is that, at this point, yeah, the Republicans have certain things they tend to stand for. They're more socially conservative, more free market oriented or whatever. But it's starting to just turn into, Vivek Ramaswamy, from what I understand, and shout out to Killian from Milwaukee, because he was there. He was outside the debate, sent me some video footage of what it was like, a lot of Trumpers protesting outside. Shout out to you, Killian. Good work. Good work, my man. He was representing CPI and the Center for Political Innovation in that crowd. Good work. But, you know, from what I understand, right, you know, Republican circles are very much turning into a free-for-all. They're very much turning into a place where, you know, it's like you're against the establishment, whatever, right? That there's not like a central focus at this point about what it means to be a Republican. Now, one thing that tends to be common, and this is interesting, because there are many Republican atheists now, especially among like libertarian types. A lot of them are into Ayn Rand and into atheism, but having a religious background of some kind tends to be common among Republicans, even if they've become an atheist as an adult, which I think is very interesting, right? In the Republican Party, it's almost universal that you grew up with some kind of religion, even if you are not currently religious yourself. And that does seem to be a unifying factor. I have a friend who just went to some Republican workshops and stuff, and he was telling me about that. He said that is one thing that seems to be universal among Republicans nowadays, and that's interesting because you would think that that wouldn't apply. It wouldn't apply, you know, when you have atheists. And what's interesting is that that used to be almost universal. You know, I mean, it used to be in the United States, if you called yourself an atheist, I remember this. It used to be if you were not religious, you were like, that was edgy. That was edgy. You know, maybe in New York City you could get away with it, but if you were not religious, that was edgy. But during the Obama years, something changed with the rise of Richard Dawkins and all of that. And now there are many young Americans who grow up without any religious training or religious background. And that is one thing that tends to be common among conservatives and Republicans or others, is that they have some kind of religious training or background, and that Democrat young people don't. You know what I mean? They don't. They might have some vague notion that God exists, or some vague notion that there's power in the universe, or they may have, they may have like a family member who's into, they may have done voodoo rituals as a teenager or something. But other than that, there's no religion for the most part among Democrat young people. Republican young people, even if they are straight up atheists now, libertarian, hard right atheists, they do have some religious background. And I think that's very interesting. It's a very, very interesting question. It almost makes you wonder how that's going to pan out, how things are going to be framed. And what that really means. I honestly don't know what to make of it. I really don't know what that's going to mean. But yeah, that was an interesting debate. It's also interesting that Tucker Carlson's interview with Donald Trump got way more views. Way more views. Way more views. Way more views. Way more views than the actual debate did. And I mean, are they going to put Donald Trump in jail? I'm curious to see how the Trump thing is going to turn out, honestly, because I feel like if things continue to go the way they're going to, they are going to put Donald Trump in jail. They are going to, but there will be a huge amount of outrage about that among the public. I mean, the public's not going to stand for that. Putting Donald Trump in jail? Are you kidding me? I mean, they're not going to stand for that. And just saying. I mean, it's, one thing, when Donald Trump said he believed that Epstein had committed suicide, I was just like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me, Donald Trump? Really? You believe that? Tucker Carlson didn't believe it. Tucker Carlson disagreed with him. That was an interesting part of the interview. But hey, if anyone's got any questions for me, feel free to send a super chat. We're only on YouTube tonight. This is totally off the cuff. I just, I did my reporting for international TV. Thought I'd turn on my phone here and have a chat with you all. I will say the YouTube suppression has gotten insane. I mean, it has gotten utterly insane. But, we're just going to keep going. What else can we do? And, but yeah, if anyone has any questions, if anyone's got any questions, please, just send me a super chat. We can talk about whatever you want. I'm here to answer your questions, chill with you all. It's late at night. I'm sitting here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment. I got work in the morning, but it's not like I have to get up at a certain time. I work from home, and my phone rings, dings, and they tell me what to do. So I'm just kind of chilling here, drinking my unnamed water beverage. So got to go to the city today. That was good. I had an appointment in the city for, getting my UN badge in order, for covering the UN General Assembly that's going to be happening this fall, September. So I was in the city for that. Folks, I try not to get so mad about social media, but anybody to say for the bottom two nobodies, Hutchinson and Burgum, I had never heard of those two guys. I will say this, since you asked that, this is more important, right? We are reacting to the debate. So Burgum, he was talking at one point, and it was epically funny. It was one of the most naturally, beautifully funny moments on television that I've seen. Like, I want to get a clip of this because it was hilarious. And he's on there, and he's from North Dakota. He's all like, when I'm in the Badlands of North Dakota, and I'm riding on a horse, and I look up at the sky, and it looks like it goes on forever. Ding, ding! And the timer device goes off. That was epic. I'm just like, oh my God, that was epic. I mean, he was rambling on about, and I'm on a horse riding in the darkness. I look up at the sky, and I say down to my horse, Feifel, Feifel, how long shall we ride? He's just rambling about the buzzer went off. That was epic. That was beautiful. That was a beautiful moment. I want a clip of that. I really do. That was epic. The whole country was just like, thank God the buzzer went off. How much longer is this guy going to talk about his horse? Oh my God. He's going to talk about his horse. He's going to talk about the Badlands, looking up at the sky. It was just like, oh my God, old man, boring soliloquy. Shut the hell up. But I mean, we were all sitting there and yeah, I got to tell you, that was epic. That was beautiful. So and then the other guy, Asa Hutchinson. So he's the governor of Arkansas. Now, Arkansas, right? That's where we had Bill Clinton. I'm Bill Clinton, President of the United States. I come from a little place called Hope. I'm Bill Clinton, and Bill Clinton, he was governor of Arkansas, right? He was the governor of Arkansas for a long time, and, we got big watermelons down there in Arkansas. It's really great. It's really awesome. I went to law school, but he's Bill Clinton, right? And so he was governor of Arkansas, and after his governorship, after he left governorship, they had Mike Huckabee, right? We all know Mike Huckabee, right? Mike Huckabee is a Fox News host. He's a conservative, I'm Mike Huckabee. His daughter was Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and she was the, it's like, so this guy, Asa Hutchinson, is the governor of Arkansas. So naturally, we just have to make him into a national political figure, right? I mean, if Bill Clinton was the governor of Arkansas, if, Mike Huckabee was the governor of Arkansas, then naturally Asa Hutchinson must go on to like great things because he's the governor of Arkansas. But I mean, I will say Mike Huckabee, I do find parts of him to be charming. He has this kind of small town Southern humor, right? Saw him someplace speaking, and I think he was speaking. It was like an event where they had different speakers, and he got up and he said, "Wow, you're all still here. I wouldn't have stayed for me, but you all are still here now, aren't you?" He's got this like Southern small town charm. Reminds me of like my grandparents or something. My grandparents are from Missouri. They're from the part of Missouri that borders Arkansas, the Ozark Mountains, and there's this kind of Southern charm. I will say that, every so often, Mike Huckabee will say things that are just like, he's doing the old man thing. He's doing the Southern charm, and he takes it too far, and everyone's just like, okay, all right. Everyone just kind of sits there like, really? The classic Mike Huckabee moment where he did that was just, it was just like, really? Did you just say that? I don't know if you remember this, but he was talking about the transgender issue. Do you remember this? And he's like, nowadays, all you have to do in order to change in the girls' locker room is to say that you're transgender. Why, when I was in high school, I would have said I was transgender so I could change in the girls' locker room. And everyone's just like, did he just say that? Did he really just say that? Did he really just say that? And he's like, I would change in the girls' locker. I mean, it was just like, really, really. So you just decided to tell the whole world in a radio interview that you would like to look at underage teenage girls without their clothes on. That's basically what you just said, Mike Huckabee. That's disgusting. We're all disgusted by you. Maybe you should not say such things on national television, or I think it was a radio interview. So there's that. That's Mike Huckabee. But this guy, Asa Hutchinson, like, you know, whatever. Thoughts on DNC primary electors this summer. One theory is that they replace Biden with Newsom to pull a 1968. That's an interesting theory. That is an interesting theory, Mariah. What I will say is, I don't know if you've seen that Biden is already referring to himself as the nominee. They're not having any debates. Biden's been calling himself the nominee. And it's like, you want to talk about entitlement. Not only is your son, I mean, his, if you file to get a firearm fraudulently, right? If you fill out an application to get a gun fraudulently, that's a serious crime in the United States. And honestly, I will say it's bullshit, but even though they can't outlaw guns, right? Because of the Second Amendment, a lot of times the penalties on crimes related to guns are ridiculous, are absolutely ridiculous. Like New York City, for example, right? New York City, you can't own a gun here, right? Even though in New York State you can own a gun, but New York City has it's like a gun-free zone, basically. New York City has like insane strict laws. And it's not just, say, if you live in Long Island and you move to New York, and when you move, you take your gun with you, right? It's not like, they just say, oh, you brought your gun here, you're not supposed to have that. No, you go to jail for 2 years, right? You're doing 2 years in prison for accidentally bringing your gun to this city. Like, it's that nuts, right? And it's like, so they can't actually outlaw guns, but they can make the penalties around gun-related crimes insane, right? That is bullshit, honestly. You know what I mean? You shouldn't go to jail because you're a legal gun owner somewhere else, and you shouldn't go to jail, for example, right? If you live in Long Island and you're a legal gun owner in Long Island and you drive through New York City and you happen to have your gun in your glove box and they pull you over and they find it, you shouldn't go to jail for 2 years, right? That's bullshit. But it's the law, and it's bullshit, right? And that's like a loophole they've found, is that they can make the penalties around gun violations insane. They can't outlaw guns, but they can make gun violations insane. One of the laws that they have is if you fraudulently apply for getting a gun, right? If you apply for a gun and you fill out the form wrong and you put false information in the form wrong, you can go to jail for up to 10 years for fraudulently applying for a gun, right? Well, Hunter Biden did that. He fraudulently applied for a gun and they gave him nothing. They gave him they made it a misdemeanor. That's insane, right? I mean, they've made that a crazy serious offense, fraudulently applying for a gun. Now, honestly, I don't think you should go to jail for a really long time for fraudulently applying for a gun. But if that's the law, and if the prisons are full of people that have been arrested for stuff like that, why doesn't it apply to Hunter Biden? None of the law applies to Hunter Biden, right? None of it applies to Hunter Biden, right? And I mean, now there's talk of the DNC electors, right? Honestly, they want Kamala Harris. They just tried to reboot Kamala Harris, didn't they? I didn't follow it. They tried to give her like a reboot speech, and it flopped. And I haven't followed it, But I mean, I'll have to look into that. I follow Kamala Harris pretty closely, but it's I mean, they've tried to relaunch Kamala Harris's career, and nobody likes Kamala Harris. But they know how to manipulate her. They know how to push her buttons. They know how to tell her what to do, and They know how to manipulate Kamala Harris, no question about it. And that's why she's there, right? She is there because the people behind the Hillary Clinton State Department, the regime change lobby, the Silicon Valley fascists, they want her there because they want to do Arab Spring 2.0 and foment chaos and unrest all over the planet. But anything else people want to talk about, right? Again, I'm not in a rush to get out of here. I'm really not in a rush to get out of here. So, we can talk for a while. I'm sitting here. So in a couple days, my book, Letter to Bob Avakian, will be published, my new book. I don't know if you all saw Elizabeth Young, shout out to Elizabeth Young, this president of CPI designed a beautiful cover for it. And this book is not what anyone's expecting. It's got it goes in a lot of different directions. This is the text of it. This is the manuscript, basically. This is, 2 versions of the manuscript I had to just go over recently, right? It's not that long. It's like, it's like less than 100 pages. But apparently, it laid out, it's going to be over 300 pages, the layout guy told me. I was talking to the layout guy today. It's going to be over 300 pages. We got a lot of graphics in it, and, it needs to be written. A lot of people don't know who Bob Avakian is and stuff, but the main reason that I wrote Letter to Bob Avakian is this, I'll just be honest with you, is that if you are the kind of person in America who gets interested in communism and wants to get involved in a communist group, one of the first organizations you run across is the RCP, the Revolutionary Communist Party. They are the most visible, in-your-face communist organization. And they are led by Bob Avakian, and at one point, they openly said they wanted to create a cult of personality around Bob Avakian. And his name, if you get interested in communism, not just on the internet, but you actually want to join a group, if you're going to events, going to rallies, learning about communism, you're going to come across Bob Avakian. Well, I want to be part of that conversation. So I wrote a book. I wrote Letter to Bob Avakian. And now anyone who Googles Bob Avakian will come across a book that I wrote. And, I want to be part of the conversation. When people that are learning about communism or learning about Bob Avakian are there, I want them to hear my ideas. I want them to learn about the Center for Political Innovation. I want them to contrast Bob Avakian's views on communism with my own. So I wrote it, right? And that's what we're going to do. Now I hope that the RCP will respond to it. I hope that Bob reads it and gives me a response. I don't think they will. I'll just be honest with you. I don't think they will. I think that they are crazy and paranoid, and they won't respond to it. But I'd like them to, And also, Bob is an old man. Bob is 82 years old as of today. He's not young. And Sansara Taylor is going to inherit the farm. Right? It'll be Sansara Taylor who runs the RCP. And then she's going to be around, right? Sansara has been viciously canceled. And I started out the book talking about how ridiculous the cancel that they faced was. But anyway, thoughts on COVID restrictions coming back. People aren't going to take it. The last round of COVID restrictions, it turns out, were not necessary, were bullshit, and people ain't going to take it, Roy. People ain't going to take it. And we have enough information now to know we shouldn't have fallen for it last time. We got a saying down south, fool me once and shame on me, and you can't fool them again. Can't fool them again. Right? That was George W. Bush, right? But no, people aren't going to take it. It's not going to happen. They could barely, towards the end of COVID, they weren't enforcing it. At the beginning, yeah, they pushed it as far as they could. But after a while, wasn't happening. Thoughts on the UMC split and what positive actions progressive Christians can take in general to keep their churches together. You're talking about the recent split in the United Methodist Church. That's what you're asking me about that, about the split in the United Methodist Church. Wow. All right. Great work on the Debunking Nixon video. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Jay Scott. I really do appreciate that. As far as the United Methodist Church, look, I grew up, in America, as far as religion is concerned, right? Globally speaking, there's many different religions, right? In America, your typical American small town has Catholic churches, it's got mainline Protestant churches, and it's got evangelical Protestant churches, right? In my little town that I grew up in, right? It was like that, right? My parents, my father, runs an environmental nonprofit, has a master's degree in biology. My mother's a librarian. So we were mainline Protestants. We attended the United Church of Christ. Another church that was very friendly to our church, that was very similar, was another mainline church. It was the United Methodist Church, another mainline Protestant church. Now, there were other people whose parents they weren't like, and the church that I went to, United Church of Christ, and the Methodist Church, you tended to have teachers, doctors, lawyers. It tended to be middle class college educated people. They tend to be mainline Protestants, because mainline Protestantism is very open-minded. Right? Mainline Protestants generally don't believe the Bible is literally true. They generally, mainline Protestants, from what I understand, why do individualist ideas thrive in the USA? I'll get to that. Mainline Protestants, they generally, they tend to be very open-minded. The church that I grew up in, you could get divorced. There was not a stigma on divorce. There were many people who joined that church after they got divorced. There was no stigma on divorce. On a national level, it was very open to gay people and stuff and whatever, right? That was mainline Protestants, right? Now Catholics, tended to be people who worked in real estate, tended to be people who owned car dealerships, small business owners. Those were your Catholics, right? Your Catholics tended to be, they were middle class, but they were more your business oriented, your salesmen, your realtors, your car dealerships. Those kind of people were Roman Catholic, right? Teachers, Roman Catholic, and then the evangelical churches, right? And in my area, there were a lot of different evangelical churches, evangelical, like people that were fundamental Baptists, and there were a lot of these old German apostolic, there was the apostolic religion, there was various brands of Mennonitism that tended to be lower income people. And those churches offered more social services. They took care of people. There was a really big evangelical church in my town that was just huge. That was a non-denominational church. It was like the size of a football stadium. It was like a mega church. It had a gym. It had daycare services, and that, lower income people, right? Working class people tended to be evangelicals because those churches offered more services to people, and their beliefs were much more straightforward. The Catholic Church is the Catholic Church, and mainline Protestants are much more open-minded, but evangelical churches are very clear. It's black or white. You're going to hell, you're going to heaven. It's very, very, there is no ambiguity, right? Gay marriage is wrong. Abortion is wrong. The Bible says it. We believe it. It's a very, cut and dry, rules-oriented philosophy, and it's also much more charismatic, the evangelical tradition. You get the preacher that yells, and people stand up and yell, and there's rock and roll music, and it's much more of a show. You have lights and things like that. It's much more charismatic, I think is the right word for it. Mainline Protestant church was almost like a ritual. And Catholic church is the same way, too. You go to Catholic church or you go to mainline Protestant church, you stand up, you sit down, there's an organ, you hear a sermon that's very calm, that tells you to be nice and treat people nice, and tells you a Bible story. You shake hands with everybody. It's kind of like a social thing. Everyone wants to see what everyone else is wearing, and that's what mainline Protestant churches and Catholic churches tend to be like. Evangelical churches, not so much. They're a different brand. So you're asking me about the split in the United Methodist Church. Well, really what it gets down to, right, is especially in the South, and this is very interesting. Like in the town I grew up in, you had the Catholic Church, you had the mainline Protestants, you had evangelicals. In a lot of southern small towns, you go to the South, southern small towns, they would joke that there'd be two churches in town, the Baptist Church and the Methodist Church. The Methodist Church was a little more open-minded and a little more tolerant, and the Baptist Church were fundamentalists, right? And among Southern white people, there's no Catholics, right? There's no Jews. There's no, Southern white people. It's not like this anymore, but like your traditional Southern small town, you have Methodists and Baptists, right? And that's, that's your traditional Southern small town. Well, in your traditional Southern small town, the Methodists are liberal in comparison to the Baptists, but they're still against gay marriage, right? Your traditional Southern small town, red state, and they're all voting Republican, even though they're the slightly more liberal church in comparison to the Baptists, they're against gay marriage, right? And that my understanding is that the reason the United Methodist Church just split is because of the fact it's because of the fact that they have as a church become pro gay marriage, pro LGBT, pro Black Lives Matter, etc. And that a lot, the United Methodist Church is a very, very big denomination, and that a lot of Southern small town Methodists, they may not be Baptists, but they're not into that, right? And that that mainline Protestant churches in small towns like the one I grew up in, and mainline Protestant churches in Arkansas, they play a different role. The kind of person who is a Methodist in Arkansas and the kind of person who's a Methodist in Pennsylvania or Ohio or even New Jersey, it doesn't line up. It doesn't line up, right? And that wokeism, the other thing about wokeism is that wokeism is not an option anymore. I mean, you're either woke or you ain't, right? You can't just kind of be like, yeah. And that, the United Methodist Church as an institution decided to go woke, and there's just a big chunk of people around the country who attend United Methodist churches in small towns, in southern towns, in red states, that maybe they're not fundamental Baptists, but they are not going to be woke, right? Maybe they're more middle class doctors and lawyers, but they're still in a small town, they're still conservative, and they're not going to be woke, right? And so that's my understanding of why the United Methodist Church just recently split, is that it's just, they can't do it. I mean, it's just not gonna happen. Now, I mean, you're asking me to say about why churches should stay together and all that. That's not up to me. I'm sorry. I mean, that's not my cup of tea, right? I grew up in mainline Protestantism, and honestly, I just, I am a liberal Protestant. I don't believe the Bible is literally true. I believe in evolution. I don't have a problem with gay marriage. So I guess I'm still kind of a liberal Protestant, but as something that you can get excited about, I find mainstream liberal Protestantism, there's nothing there. It doesn't have any energy, right? It doesn't have any energy, right? And that as I become more religious, and as religion becomes more important to me, and as I talk about Jesus and socialism and such like that more, as I do that, my rhetorical style, I mean, the way I see things, even though my beliefs kind of line up with liberal Protestantism, liberal Protestantism is not, there's no energy there. There's no energy there. And we're increasingly becoming a very secular society. And increasingly now, being religious is a statement, right? Being religious now, it's there's no de facto being religious anymore. And because of that, it's going to be very hard for liberal Protestant, mainline Protestantism to survive. They tried, and I saw it. I went and I sat in the pews. They tried, especially right after Donald Trump was elected, to start liberal woke churches all over Brooklyn. And I went and sat in those pews. Not going to work. Not going to work, right? It's not going to work, right? Woke Christianity doesn't work. You can't do it. You can't do it, right? And they tried. They have tried so hard, right? And there are plenty of African American folks who are more or less woke and attend a church, but the church is not woke. When you try to do a woke church, it flops every time. It just doesn't work. Wokeism is a deconstructionist ideology. It is an individualist ideology. It glorifies rebellion and destruction, and religion in its nature is about holding people together. It's a collective experience. It's not going to work. You can't do woke Christianity. You can't do it, right? And I watched, and they tried, and there was all kinds of money dished out. The Wall Street Journal was doing articles. The New York Times was doing articles. The rise of the religious left, and it didn't happen. Didn't happen. But anyway, that was a long answer to that question. I got a few more questions that have come in. Keep them rolling in, right? I'm having a good old time here. I'm having a great time. So I want to make sure I answer everybody's questions, right? Why do individualist ideas thrive in the US? Well, I think that that is because of the pioneer history in the United States, and it's because we're not a nation as a country. The United States is not a nation. A nation is a group of people that have a common language, a common culture, a common ancestry. We don't have that. The United States is not Ireland. The United States is not Scotland. The United States is not France. The United States is not Germany. We're not a nation. And so part of collectivism is a nationalist outlook. Is that you have this national bond. You know, when you become a German citizen, you have to take all kinds of classes, and you have to learn all kinds of things, and you're accepting the German nationality. You're accepting a history. You're accepting a set of beliefs and all of that. You know, when you become an American, it's like you take your quiz, you learn about the Declaration of Independence, you talk about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., you talk about freedom of speech and freedom of religion. You're an American, right? You know, we don't have a nationality. And if you look at a lot of the United States, when it was being settled, it was a lot of, you know, obviously this doesn't apply to black people that were brought here in chains, doesn't apply to indigenous people who were, you know, forced into this country. It doesn't apply to the Chicano people who, you know, had the border, you know, they say we didn't cross the border crossed us. It doesn't apply to them. But for a lot of people who came to the United States as immigrants from the various waves of immigration that came into the United States, it was very, very much an individualist thing. It's like, I'm going to leave my old life behind. I'm going to leave my country of origin. I'm going to leave all of that behind and come to the new land, you know, and that a lot of the writings of Thomas Jefferson are about yeoman and the individual small farmer, right? You know, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that. So there you go. Is Maui going to be Biden's Waterloo, or will he make money? I mean, Waterloo is the battle where Napoleon lost, right? And so I mean, it's bad for Biden. It's a bad moment, but I don't think it's his Waterloo. I think it just fits in with a bunch of other awful things that have been going on with Biden. I mean, Biden's administration has been an absolute train wreck. I mean, he's been a train wreck of a president, just a horrible president in so many ways. And, you know, when he says no comment and he goes out there and talks about a kitchen fire and, you know, falls asleep while these people had a fire because, you know, and I mean, the whole fire, I mean, look at it. I mean, it was because the infrastructure of the state, you know, the electrical infrastructure was falling apart. You know, the power grid was falling apart, and the you know, the siren system didn't work, and it's like it's an example of a dysfunctional country. So there you go. There you go. In Mexico, a trans woman just won a popular reality show, and she's the talk of the town right now, which is strange because Mexico is conservative. Well, that raises an interesting question now, doesn't it? What does conservative mean? AMLO would probably not consider himself to be a conservative. The current president of Mexico, he's, you know, Morena, his coalition has got a communist party in the coalition, right? The PT, the Labor Party, that's formerly a party of Enver Hoxha followers. They've kind of become more of a mainstream communist party. You know, they're like a legit communist party. The Communist Party of Mexico, the PT, they're part of his coalition. I don't think AMLO would consider himself a conservative. I mean, labor unions are huge. You know, AMLO traces his presidency back to a rebellion in Oaxaca that took place. So I don't think AMLO considers himself to be a conservative, but they're not culturally left, right? And that's the thing. Left in America, it's come to refer to this kind of, you know, this, I don't know what you want to call it. You know, when we talk about synthetic left, we talk about wokeism, we talk about, you know, SJW, we talk about, LGBT, we talk about all of that stuff. Around the world, that stuff is not necessarily considered to be left, right? That stuff is considered to be, I don't know what you call it, but, you know, it's not left, right? But yeah, Mexico is culturally much more conservative than the United States. Very Roman Catholic country. The people there are not into gay marriage. They're not into abortion. They're not into, you know, gay pride parades and stuff. But, you know, American culture is everywhere. And, you know, I mean, there are gay people in Mexico. Obviously, there's a lot of tourism in Mexico, and there's a lot of gay resorts and stuff. And so it makes sense that even though Mexican culture is going to be less, is I guess less primed for this kind of thing than other cultures, it makes sense that they would have a moment where that's going to be the case. In 2023, is the U.S. in a way still segregated? Well, that's interesting, right? Because the answer is obviously yes, right? In terms of school integration, even though, the US Supreme Court ruled that schools should be integrated, they're not. There are black schools and white schools. That's just the reality of the situation in the United States. During the 70s, there was the busing thing, and that led to white flight from urban centers and the rioting. And the USA is still a very segregated country. There's no question about it. It is still a very segregated country, racially speaking, but it's way less so than it was before. And I mean, I just think about my hometown that I grew up in, the town that I grew up in, the little tiny town that I grew up in. A lot of families from India. There's a lot of Latino folks there, and it's much less white than when I was there. Is that a bad thing? No, I think more diversity is good. When I was a kid there, the lack of diversity was very stifling. There wasn't, there was a lot of arrogant white people shit going on, stuff that, people saying things that they should have thought twice about saying, but wouldn't have said if they'd ever met a person of color. And so I think it's a good thing that my town is more integrated. I think it's great that there's more people of color and different backgrounds in my town, but I think the whole country is becoming like that. And a lot of it is just that, the younger generation doesn't care. Right? I mean, the younger generation just doesn't care. There's a lot more interracial marriages now than there used to be, especially among low-income white people. Right? It used to be interracial marriage was like an edgy thing, right? The rich white girl marries a black guy, and but that's now interracial marriage. I think is much more common among working class people, right? It's much more common. You have white and black together. You have different races, different nationalities, people from other countries marrying people that are born in this. I mean, it's much more common, and people are okay with it, and that's a good thing, right? I mean, I don't think that's bad at all. Now, is the USA segregated in a way? I mean, the USA is polarized in a way, I would say, right? I would say the USA is polarized, right? Red states versus blue states and all of that. There was a kid from my town of Indian heritage, a huge Trump supporter. And I remember, like, when Donald Trump was running for president, he was messaging me every day about how much he loved Donald Trump. He's from India, right? He doesn't like Muslims, right? There's kind of a animosity towards Muslims in Indian culture, and there's kind of a history there, and and also he started his father, I think, is a small business owner, and that's just kind of how he sees things. It may be unlikely, but do you think the left faction of the GOP would ever form? I think that what's happening is it's a very long process, and I've said this for a long time, right? What's this? I've said this for a long time. There's kind of a long process playing out in the United States right now. That we're gradually getting to the point that populism and working class politics are coming back. And it's gradual. It's not going to happen overnight, and it's going to take some time, right? And that things are the Democrats historically have been that kind of party, but they aren't anymore, and they're making that clear. This is a long process. The Democratic Party has de-Roosevelted itself. It's taken quite some time. It started with what was it called? The AB scam, where Jimmy Carter sent a guy, the FBI and Jimmy Carter, they sent a guy dressed up in an Arab costume to frame up a bunch of congressmen for bribery. You can see that in the movie American Hustle. They portray it. They kind of fictionalize it. But, a lot of populist, working class Democrat guys that were tied to the Teamsters Union and stuff, they all got thrown in jail by the Carter administration. It's called AB scam. There was that, and then you had Bill Clinton and the rise of the Democrat Leadership Council, the DLC, right? And that was, again, it was trying to remove the Bernie Sanders kind of Democrats from things, and one thing led to another, and then wokeism kind of takes the cake, and yeah, I do think that we're seeing the gradual transition of American politics. Is the Republican Party going to become a communist or socialist party? No. But the kind of sentiments that the Republican Party is appealing to, and we saw that on the stage with Vivek Ramaswamy tonight. I mean, Vivek Ramaswamy, I don't think he's genuine, but he was the most populistic in his rhetoric. And that's what Republicans increasingly want to hear. And that's leading to a change in American politics. That doesn't mean the Republican Party is going to become good. It just means that Republicans as a group, the kind of people, as conservatives become the opposition, they will take on views that are more oppositional. And in America, the free market and free market capitalism is the prevailing view. Now, there was a reason. I am convinced there was a reason that Mike Pence called Putin a communist on the stage. That was intentional. And they talked about communist China, right? Is they really want to get into the minds of conservatives that communism is what they're against, right? And I have seen so much Republican propaganda online that this is basically what it says. Hey, you know those woke people you don't like? And it points to, annoying trans activists. It points to SJW who's annoying. It points to whatever. These people you don't like that are woke, which universally, most Americans don't like woke people. They just don't. They're communists. Well, that's step one. And then step two, and now we're just going to unload a bunch of bull crap about the history of communism. Stalin killed a gamillion people. Mao ate people's brains and boiled babies, blah, 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 blah. And that's why the free market is great and we got to privatize everything. Right? And there is a lot of propaganda in Republican circles that follows that exact line. And it's like, that there's just so many holes in that. Like, where do we begin? First of all, wokes are not communists. I mean, they're not, right? Wokes want to overthrow those governments even more than regular folks do. Vosh is like a cheerleader for sending weapons to Ukraine. He preaches anti-China propaganda constantly, but ContraPoints, AOC is one of the most hawkish members. So the wokes are not communists in any conceivable way. They sound nothing like the Communist Party of China. They sound nothing like the Communist Party of Venezuela. They sound nothing like the communists in North Korea or Vietnam or any communist country. They sound absolutely not like any of them. So number one. So the wokes are not communists, number two. And number two, the insane anti-communist stuff, it never gets debunked. The only people who debunk that kind of stuff are people like me, right? And we never get an opportunity, right? We never get an opportunity to speak our piece. No one, they get on TV and they say Mao killed a gajillion million people. And the only response you'll ever get is they'll get some guy on there who says, well, that wasn't real socialism, or, oh, yeah, and they never will let anyone debunk any of that. That's just forbidden, right? So then they sell you a bunch of stuff that's not true. And then on top of that, then they say, so we got to privatize everything, and free markets and austerity are the answer. And that doesn't compute either, right? There's many reasons why you can you take communism out of the picture, why having a welfare state is good, why having the government spend money on infrastructure is good, and it's like three deceptions, right? It's like one lie, followed by another lie, followed by another lie. And I see this pattern in so much conservative propaganda now. Right? And it's like three false things, and they're supposed to flow from each other, and they're all false, right? Wokes are not communists. Communism did not fail everywhere it's ever been tried. And on top of that, free market capitalism is not the solution, right? And it's just lie, lie, lie. And that what I routinely see is that the reason it doesn't get debunked is that communists, or so-called communists, they get stuck on the first one. They want to defend wokeism. It's like you already lost at that point if you're defending wokeism. Wokeism is toxic. It is absolutely toxic. Wokeism is absolutely toxic. It is a circular firing squad. It is destructive. And go woke, go broke. It destroys organizations. It destroys movements. It destroys people. And there's many examples of it. It is just a toxic, destructive worldview that is not communist at all. And so if you don't break with wokeism, if you don't get to the point where if anyone shows up and starts talking woke, you just get out, right? If you don't get to the point where you can do that, you're doomed, right? And that's why the Center for Political Innovation is strong. That's why we're growing. That's why we're expanding. Is from the beginning, our rule has been If you're going to come in here and start talking about cancel culture, get out, right? You're going to get in here, we have trans people in CPI. We have lesbian and gay people in CPI. We have people of different races, different genders. And we would never allow anyone to bully or mistreat anyone because of that. And to be honest, unfortunately, in the Jackson Hinkle Haas universe, there's a lot of hate and there's a lot of bullying that goes on. Well, we don't play with that, right? We're not going to let anybody bully anybody else. But that said, we're also not going to exclude anyone. If someone says, I'm a woman and I'm a feminist and I have issues with the trans thing, you're welcome. If somebody says, I'm a Christian, I'm an evangelical Christian, I don't believe in this stuff, you're welcome. And we don't take a stand. We are neutral, right? We're not for gay marriage or against gay marriage. We're not for abortion or against abortion. And we don't want to talk about it. We just don't want to talk about it. We're not interested. If you want to have an anti-trans organization, or if you want to have a pro-trans organization, go somewhere else. We ain't doing that. If you want to have a pro-gay marriage organization or an anti-gay marriage organization, go somewhere else. We ain't going to do it, right? If you want to have a pro-abortion organization or an anti-abortion organization, go somewhere else. We ain't going to do it. Not going to do it. Not going to do it. Wouldn't be prudent. Wouldn't be prudent. Not going to do it. That's Daddy Bush, by the way, right? The son, George W. Bush, is like, not going to do it. We're not going to do it. Al-Qaeda, the terrorists, not going to do it. But his father would be like, not going to do it, not going to do it, wouldn't be prudent, right? His father had a much more higher and squeakier and slimier way of doing things, right? In the Bush family, right? I got to work on my Bush impressions. But anyway, I'm here to answer folks' questions. People got anything else they want me to talk about? I'm all ears, right? Hey, it's late at night. We've already been going for an hour, but I got loads of energy. Whatever people want to talk about the debate, right? What about the debate? Anything else people got on their minds? I'm taking super chats. What the heck, right? I will answer your questions. I'm Bill Clinton, and I'm here to answer your questions. I did not have sexual relations with that woman. Monica Lewinsky is just a friend. She's just a friend of mine, and I'm the president. I'm Bill Clinton. Is that Bill Clinton? Does he sound like that? I don't know. I got to work on my Bill Clinton, but it's like that half voice kind of, right? One thing people always say about Bill Clinton is he just gives people a good feeling when you meet him, right? That something about him, when you meet Bill Clinton, he just gives you a good feeling. The wife, not so much, right? Not so much. But Bill, he has this way of he just makes everyone feel like they're appreciated. They like that guy. That guy is on their team. A very charming guy. And they needed a very charming guy to take the Democratic Party into austerity mode. They really needed that. To take the Democratic Party into austerity mode. And they did the same thing with Tony Blair in the UK. Tony Blair was amazingly charismatic. Just amazingly charismatic. And that's why they were able to use him to push New Labor and drop Clause 4 from the Labor Party's constitution, right? You watch Tony Blair. There's some people in Britain who are struggling to pay their bills. This isn't right. This isn't the Britain we fought for. My heart goes out to the working families that are struggling. I'm Tony Blair. It's weird, right? And, I don't know. Anyway, but anything else people have got on their minds? I love to get on here. I love to do my job as a reporter. I love to lead the Center for Political Innovation. I love your impersonations. Can you do one of Trump too? Well, Trump, you have to work on it, right? Because, when you do an impression, right, you have to make sure you're not doing an impression that somebody else does. You're doing your own impression, right? And that Donald Trump speaks slowly. Look. And he's changed over the years. I remember when I first heard Donald Trump, there's a lot more lip. It'd be like, huge. I'm Donald Trump. It's huge, right? He would do this with his mouth a lot. Huge, right? But look. And he repeats phrases a lot. They give him a phrase, right? And, after the grab her by the pussy tape came out, he was like, it was locker room talk. Locker room talk. That's what it was. What it was, locker room talk, people. It was locker room talk. Locker room talk. Locker room talk. And then he has one hand like this all the time, which I do not know what that is. Right? And then he has the other hand he's gesturing with. It was locker room talk. Locker room talk. That's what it was. It was locker room talk. And look, Iran is not living up to the spirit of the agreement. There was a spirit to the Iran nuclear deal. Iran is not living up to the spirit of the agreement. They are not doing it. They're not doing it. He repeats phrases a lot. He's got the one hand like this. He's got the other hand that he's gesturing with. And there's kind of with the lips, he talks like this. It's very working class. That's how Donald Trump talks, even though he's from a very wealthy background, right? It's kind of a New Jersey, New York guy thing. And he talks like this, right? So that's my Donald Trump. That's my Donald Trump. That is my Donald Trump impression. So hope you all enjoy the show. All right, why did the U.S. allow East Asian countries to develop, but not Latin America? Is this because they danced to the rhythm of the U.S. empire? Well, Roy, I can tell you exactly why that is. In Asia, in the 1960s and 70s, communism was spreading like wildfire. You had the People's Democratic Republic of Korea. You had North Vietnam. You had the Chinese Communist Party, right? The USA sent troops to the Korean Peninsula, and, China moved in, sent its forces to Korea, rescued North Korea, drove the United States back to the 38th parallel. And South Korea's economy was very unstable. The first military dictator they put into power in South Korea, his name was Syngman Rhee, brutal military dictator, and he was overthrown. The people of the country, they rose up against him, April Revolution. And the students of South Korea rose up against him, and there were strikes and protests. And all over South Korea, there was a lot of communists in South Korea. It's not legal to be a communist in South Korea, but in South Korea, you have a lot of labor unions, you have a lot of college professors, a lot of people in South Korea were communists. And Syngman Rhee was an unpopular dictator. And so the communists in South Korea, even though they weren't legal, they were able to foment an uprising and topple Syngman Rhee. So the USA said, okay, we need another military dictator in South Korea, but it can't be Syngman Rhee. And so Park Chung-hee became the dictator of South Korea. And one of the main things that Park Chung-hee had to do was North Korea was booming because of Soviet economic development, right? The Soviet Union was building power plants. The Soviet Union was building schools and hospitals. So Park Chung-hee, if he was going to make South Korea stable, he had to offer economic development. So the USA arranged for Japan to loan money to the government of South Korea to build a state-run steel industry, to build state-run computer companies and telecommunications companies, car companies, and that with state-run planning and military control, because the USA was pouring a lot of money into South Korea's military, South Korea was able to build itself up. And that was kind of the model of the Asian tiger countries. But then there's another factor. So the USA is allowing, on the island of Taiwan, you have an authoritarian military government. But again, in order to stay in power, it's got to stabilize things. In Singapore, similar situation. Lee Kuan Yew, an authoritarian military guy. The USA is allowing them to develop to stabilize the country. But then in 1978, you have the reform and opening up, where China starts to open up economically, and all kinds of foreign trade is pouring into China. So China's economy is expanding. They're all right next to China, so they can trade with China. So China starts trading with the Asian tiger countries. Singapore is doing business with China, right? South Korea is doing business with China, right? Taiwan, the island of Taiwan, even though, they don't recognize each other, they're doing business with China, right? So China's economic expansion and boom in the 80s and 90s enables a lot of these countries that were, the USA basically facilitated them establishing kind of Bonapartist industrialization. It enables them to start trading with China, and so their economies start really expanding. It's pretty clear that in the 90s, the United States did not like those countries. And you saw that, there was a huge diplomatic spat in the 90s when Lee Kuan Yew, who was the leader of Singapore, he took the child of an American diplomat and sentenced him to a public caning, right? I mean, that was clearly done to just kind of give the middle finger to the United States. And then the height of that was at the very end of the Clinton administration. You had the crash on the Asian markets. And basically, George Soros coordinated with a number of other people, and they just pulled all their money out of the Asian tiger countries all at once. And it's pretty clear the United States doesn't appreciate South Korea. The United States does not appreciate Singapore. It does not appreciate any economic independence on the part of Taiwan. But it tolerates it, but it allowed it to happen, but it got out of their control. And then China became a big partner with a lot of these Asian tiger countries. And the USA, it's something the USA kind of got duped into allowing, right? That during the time period of the post-World War II economic expansion, the United States enabled a number of its allies to have Bonapartist military regimes that could start industrializing. And then they lost control of it. Now, what's interesting is, one of those regimes was in the Philippines. It was Marcos, the dictator Marcos in the Philippines. Well, the United States also removed Marcos, right? Marcos was the military dictator of the Philippines. And he was one of these authoritarians, and he was starting to industrialize. And then Soros and the United States removed him. Right? And a lot of communists don't want to admit that. They want to just say, oh, it was the Filipino people. Yes, it was the Filipino people, but it wasn't just the communists. It wasn't just a left thing. The USA also didn't like Marcos, right? And that much more so than in Latin America, the USA was kind of tricked into allowing various military strongmen to come into office, And all right, so thoughts on China's one-child policy. Well, look, I have talked to a number of people from China who have explained the one-child policy to me, and they have explained that it is related to the rural policies, and I guess my understanding is that it was to prevent the rise of a rural bourgeoisie. That as they were privatizing land in the countryside and you had independent farmers, they did not want to see the rise of a rural capitalist class, a group of rural landowners. And I do not understand why that is. And there are people from China who have gone into great depth explaining that to me, how it served an economic policy, an economic purpose in China in terms of maintaining socialism and such. Now, that said, I am for population expansion. I am for the population expanding and rising, right? And so I am against any notion of overpopulation. And that's where I give credit to the LaRouche people, despite whatever disagreements there are. Hey, that's one thing that I remember when I was in the Workers' World Party, I talked about overpopulation at one point because I had grown up being taught about overpopulation. My father is a Darwinist, biologist, Malthusian. Overpopulation in the household I grew up in was just considered to be a fact. Human beings are overpopulating. That's just a fact. It's bad for the environment. That was just a fact. So I assumed that was true. I was hanging out with different Maoist groups and stuff. They said that was fine. I joined the Workers' World Party. I remember I mentioned overpopulation. And they're like, nope, we don't talk about that. And I'm like, why? And they're like, well, it's racist. And I said, what? They're like, it's racist. It's racist, and we just, Malthusian. They said it's Malthusianism. I'm like, okay, and it's racist, and we just don't talk about that. But they never really gave me an answer why. It wasn't until I started talking to the LaRouche people, right? They're very anti-Malthusian. Then I went and dug up what Karl Marx wrote about Malthusian, and then I watched Peter Coffin. Peter Coffin has done great stuff on the question of overpopulation. He has a great film he made called Overpopulation is Bullcrap. And if you can understand the economics of why Malthusian economics is bullshit, right? If you can understand that, that's a really important thing in understanding Marxism, right? That I didn't understand Marxism, right? I remember, so much of Marxism. When you talk about Marxism, right? You're talking about like the history of human civilization. Starts out with hunter-gatherer civilization. From there we get slavery. Eventually we have feudalism. And out of feudalism comes capitalism. The idea is capitalism will eventually lead to socialism. Socialism will eventually lead to communism. And communism is the ideal world. That's where there's no oppression, there's no inequality, there's no need for any government, right? And so the way it was explained to me by Maoists and ultra-left elements that I was talking to, it was always explained like, well, socialism is when we have a revolutionary government, people are taken care of, but also, it's increasing democracy, and eventually, like, socialism just makes people good, and that leads to communism, right? That's the way it was explained. And then you had a lot of people saying, well, I don't think that'll ever be the case. I don't think people are just going to naturally be good. And I would say, well, I got to the point where I would just not argue with people about the final goal of communism because I figured that's just an abstract argument. It's not important. But then I remember one time I was in an event. There was a guy named Fred Goldstein who just died, actually. And Fred and I were not good friends, to be honest. We were not really good friends. I see your question, Roy, and I'll get to that after I finish this anecdote. Fred and I were not good friends, to be honest. Fred and I didn't get along. But I was at an event one time when Fred was speaking, and somebody got up and they said, well, how do you think communism, the final goal of communism, can ever be achieved? And he explained that communism is on the basis of vast abundance. And it blew my mind. I had never understood that before. The basis of building a stateless, classless world is eradicating scarcity. And I read the critique of the Goethe program, and I read Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific. Again, I had read it before, and I understood that the problem with capitalism is that capitalism holds back economic growth because of the problem of overproduction. Because people are homeless because there are too many houses. People are hungry because there's too much food, right? The tendency of the falling rate of profit, the glut, all of that, that is the problem with capitalism. Capitalism creates a situation where the more wealth that is created, people get poorer. It's not rational. Socialism eliminates that and lays the basis for a post-scarcity world where there's just so much wealth, there's no need for any state, and there's no need for anyone to hoard because there's enough to go around. People just have what they need. And that's what it's based on. Well, that was a huge revelation to me because no one had ever explained it that way. And a lot of communists don't explain it that way, but that's the actual understanding, right? And the problem with Malthusianism is that Malthusianism says that growth is bad. Right? That's what Malthusianism says, that when human beings expand their population, when there's higher living standards and all of that, that's bad. It leads to economic collapse because there's just too many people, right? And Malthusianism is an attempt to explain the problem of overproduction by arguing the problem is just overpopulation and arguing that there is what you call non-productive consumers. That's the basis of it, that human beings consume but don't produce, and that's not true, right? It is human labor that creates all wealth. So if you have more people, you have more wealth because human labor creates wealth. But Malthusianism doesn't see it that way. Malthusianism says, well, there's only so much wealth that can be created, but if you have more people, then you don't have enough wealth to feed all those people. Well, the more people you create, the more wealth they can create because it is human labor that creates all wealth. You don't have non-productive consumers, right? The only reason you would have non-productive consumers is because of capitalism, unemployment, right? Eliminating the role of the worker in production. But there are no non-productive consumers. Human beings, human creativity, human labor, that is the source of all wealth. So more people means more wealth for everybody. So there you go. All righty. All right. So have you heard Michael Jackson's song, They Don't Really Care About Us? Right? I have absolutely heard that song, right? Skinhead, deadhead. I have heard that song. When Michael Jackson died, that song was quite popular. And that is actually, it's a highly political and kind of black nationalist song that Michael Jackson did, right? And it references Malcolm X, it references Martin Luther King Jr., it references this understanding that many people in the black community have felt for a long time. They've been trying to get rid of us for years. When I went to New Orleans, I was, 18 years old. I went to New Orleans for the anniversary of the hurricane. And I talked to people in the Ninth Ward, and they all believed the levee had been bombed by the government. Now, I have no evidence to confirm that, but they all believed it had been. And the reason that they said it was bombed was because the white people have been trying to get rid of us for years. That's a widespread feeling in the black community, right? That's why a lot of black people are opposed to abortion, because they feel that the white people are trying to wipe out black people, trying to prevent them from expanding as a group, trying to prevent them from reproducing. And a lot of Puerto Rican people are very opposed to abortion as well because they remember, how their tubes were tied, how the white people were tying the tubes of Puerto Rican women to prevent them from reproducing because they wanted the island to belong to white people. And that song kind of gives voice to a feeling in the black community that the ruling government doesn't care. I mean, that's what Kanye West said. You remember that after Hurricane Katrina? Kanye West said, George Bush doesn't care about black people. He said that on television. Well, that feeling, they don't really care about us. It's very widespread in the black community. And I mean, I think it's true. It's not only on a racial basis. They don't care about the working class. They don't care about the working class at all, right? They're trying to maximize their profits, and they have less and less room for us at the assembly line in their mode of production. They're replacing us with machines. And so we stand outcast and starving mid the wonders we have made. And eventually we're going to have to rise up and take control of the means of production, right? That's Marxism. That's socialism. That's, and it's an economic theory. It has nothing to do with wokeism, right? And that's what I'm in this. That's what my book, Where is America Going, is all about, right? That's what the book is all about. That's what I'm out there promoting. That's what the Center for Political Innovation is promoting. That's what we're all about. And that's what we're all about. And there you go. There you go. Any more questions people want to ask? Go right ahead. Go right ahead. Ask me whatever you want to ask me. It's late, but I work from home, just covered the debate, did that. I'm up. I'm enjoying myself, right? It's summer. It's late August. It is late. So I do my Trump. It's late August, folks. It is late August, and I am Donald Trump, and I'm talking to you about August. How Glass-Steagall repeal fuels crisis. Well, the Glass-Steagall law, right? Glass-Steagall was a law passed by Franklin Roosevelt that separated commercial banking from speculative banking. That, the way Roosevelt explained it is that people shouldn't be able to gamble on the stock market with other people's money. That was the idea. That people shouldn't be able to gamble on the stock market with other people's money, because during the Great Depression, what had happened was that a lot of Americans kept their money in a bank. Pretty normal, right? Keep your money in a bank. And those banks would then take the people's money and invest it on the stock market. So when the stock market crashed, which happened during the Great Depression, 1929, great stock market crash, the stock market crashed, a lot of Americans went to the bank and the money wasn't there. It was gone. Why? Well, the bank had invested it on the stock market and lost all their money. Well, the Glass-Steagall law was to make sure that that couldn't happen. That if you put your money in a bank, that bank could not play it on the stock market. That was the idea. That was the idea of the Glass-Steagall law. You can't gamble with other people's money. It's one thing people used to talk about. Now, I never observed this, but it's one thing, my grandparents, I never saw this, right? But it's one thing that like my parents would talk about. It was like a stereotype about old people when I was a kid, is that old people did not trust the bank, right? I don't know if you ever heard this. It's very sad. But, when an old person would die, right, in my little town in Ohio, if they were very old, they're in their 80s, it was very common, very, very common. The old person died, they took their body away, and as their family's going through their stuff, they would open up the mattress and find thousands and thousands of dollars stuffed into the mattress. Because the old person didn't trust the bank. Or, they would find a drawer full of thousands and thousands of dollars that the old person had put there. Why? Well, that's the trauma. Well, if they remember during the Great Depression, one day mommy and daddy went to the bank and their money wasn't there. All right? That's why we have Glass-Steagall. The idea is that your money, when you go to the bank, they can't invest it. Now, we also have the FDIC, right? And that's also like insurers to make sure that doesn't happen, right? So if you go to the bank, right, the FDIC ensures that your money will be there also, right? But so we have the FDIC, but we also have Glass-Steagall, which is that private commercial banking and speculative banking, Wall Street banks and private banks are separate. We don't have Glass-Steagall anymore. It was gradually eroded over the course of the 70s and 80s. And it was Bill Clinton who finally took it out back and shot it. And now at this point, the bank that you put your money in is investing on Wall Street. So Glass-Steagall is no more. Glass-Steagall is no more. But that's what it was passed. And that's when Roosevelt, Glass-Steagall was in his opening speech, when his first State of the Union speech that he gave. I have come to drive the money changers out of the temple. Right? No more will private banks be able to play the stock market with other people's money. Right? I mean, back then, right, a lot of wealthy people, they had what they called the mid-Atlantic accent. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, the mid-Atlantic accent. And that was, they taught at elite private schools like Roosevelt attended. They would teach young men to speak appropriately when speaking in front of an audience. And it was not a British accent. It was just considered to be the dignified way of speaking. And if you came from money and you went to an elite private school, you would have public speaking classes in which they taught you to speak like this. And this is how our presidents would always speak, because they came from money and went to elite private schools. William F. Buckley is kind of the great example of that. Yes, I'm William F. Buckley. Yes. Well, if everyone's guilty of everything, then no one's guilty of anything. I mean, it's they're not English, but they learn to speak in this like formal way. You still see traces of that, right? But it used to be that was part of being a gentleman, part of being a New England wealthy kid, right? In my new book, I talk in this book about the Groton School for Boys, the Endicott Peabody, where Roosevelt was educated. And Endicott Peabody, this elite school, they taught them all how to public speak that way. And they didn't speak that way when they weren't in front of a microphone, when they weren't in front of an audience, right? It was just that's how you publicly spoke. They trained you in the art of public speaking. And that we just, for whatever reason, we stopped doing that. You still hear hints of it. Ann Coulter. I don't know if folks know about Ann Coulter. Ann Coulter is interesting to me, right? She's kind of peaked, right? She's kind of, her whole thing was she was really good looking. She was a blonde, right? She was a lawyer and a constitutional law scholar. She hated Bill Clinton. She was working with people in D.C. to go after Bill Clinton. She wrote this book, High Crimes and Misdemeanors, the case against William Jefferson Clinton, and she kind of rose during the Clinton impeachment. And during the Bush years, she was just this really well-known conservative Fox News pundit. And she got old, and then conservatism changed. She tried to reinvent herself as like a Trump populist, but Ann Coulter's kind of a thing of the past, right? It was fun while it lasted, but it's over. But Ann Coulter was, she was a big deal during the Bush years. And there were many times, and I read a number of Ann Coulter's books, and, I found her entertaining, even though she was a right-wing conservative and whatever. She knew too much about communism. Way too much about communism. And I always wondered why. The other thing about Ann Coulter is that she talks like this. Yes. The liberal bias is just so extreme. Oh my God, yes. Oh, really? She talks like this. And there's a voice, she covers it up, but every so often it comes through. Like the way she says her R's and all of that. Right? Well, now we know. We know who Ann Coulter is. Someone in the chat said she's a dude. She's not a dude. It's much more complicated than that. But pay attention. You're kind of on the right track, but she's not a dude. She's not transgender. Ann Coulter's father was Jack Coulter, who was one of the top FBI agents, one of the leaders of the FBI. Look this up. This is a fact. Ann Coulter's father was Jack Coulter. And the reason is after the movie Bridge of Spies came out, remember that movie Bridge of Spies? Apparently, there was a character in the movie who is supposed to be Ann Coulter's father, Jack Coulter. So Ann Coulter, right? Ann Coulter's father was a top anti-communist FBI guy. Now this is, we're getting there, right? So Ann Coulter, her father is a top anti-communist FBI guy. Now we know during the 70s, right, J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI, they were much more conservative. They didn't like Ramsey Clark, who I used to work for, was the U.S. Attorney General under Lyndon Johnson. He was constantly trying to hold them back and stop them from doing what they're doing. They did like Richard Nixon. The FBI, they hated the commies and the Reds, and that they were constantly stalking the Communist Party USA, constantly stalking the Black Panthers, constantly stalking the various Marxist groups. They went after the new communist movement, the Revolutionary Communist Party, etc. Well, Ann Coulter's father was apparently the leader of the anti-communist division of the FBI, the wing of the FBI that went after communists. So you got to imagine this. Ann Coulter, as a girl, grew up in a house where her father was a professional anti-communist, a professional government oppressor of communists, a professional red hunter. Basically, her father was a professional anti-communist witch hunter, right? A professional stalker of communists, a professional harasser of communists. Now, look at Ann Coulter and the way she presents herself. Her voice is slightly deeper, and slightly deep, right? And when she talks about politics, and she's an obsessive conservative, right? It's all, and many people have pointed out, her books rarely champion conservative causes. They rarely explain conservative values. It's all just about the left and why leftists are bad. They're bad. Leftists are bad. Leftists are bad. They're just bad. Oh, they're communists. They're traitors. She wrote this book, Treason, From the Cold War to the War on Terror. Leftists are bad. Of course, that's what her dad was saying around the house all day long, because her dad was stalking leftists. That's what her dad did. He spent his entire life stalking communists for the FBI, wiretapping their phones, following them around. So, of course, Ann Coulter talks that way. Sigmund Freud has a concept called penis envy. And it refers to a girl, this is very interesting, a girl whose father never really accepts her because she's female. Right? The father wants a boy, and she's a girl. And so the father never really accepts her because she's female, but she's longing for her father's affection. And because of that, as she grows up, she takes on very masculine ways of being in the hopes of gaining her father's affection. Ann Coulter. That's Ann Coulter. Jack Coulter she could never be the boy that Jack Coulter wanted. She could never be the anti-communist, red-hunting son that Jack Coulter wanted. But Ann Coulter desperately wanted her father's affection. So, in a desperate desire to win her father's affection, she became obsessed with her father's favorite issue, hating leftists and hating communists. She took on a very masculine way of presenting in the hopes that she could get the love that her father would never give her because she wasn't a boy. So, no, she's not transgender. She's not transgender, but she presents in a very masculine way, and she's obsessed with hating communists because she wants to gain the love of her anti-communist FBI dad, right? It all makes sense if you read Sigmund Freud, right? And I mean, Ann Coulter, it's like a complete Freudian case. I mean, it's just like open shut, penis envy, right? You know, Jack Coulter, who's like, apparently, I think there's like a building at the FBI named after Jack Coulter, from what I've been told. Jack Coulter, her anti-communist dad could never give her the love that she wanted, never give her the love that she desired, and so in a desire to get father's love, she did what daddy did. Daddy tore down communists. Daddy probably talked about how much he hated communists all day long. And Ann Coulter grew up to be this woman who goes on TV and preaches against communism all day, right? And I mean, that's exactly what her father wanted her to be. And now conservatism is changing. It used to be that conservatives were defenders of the establishment who hated leftists. And that was perfect for Ann Coulter, because that's what her dad did for a living. He hated leftists. She hates, leftists. But now, being a conservative, the conservatives are the radicals. Donald Trump they're going to throw him in jail to prevent him from being president. They accuse him of working for the Russians. That's not what a conservative is in our time. Republicans now are a very different breed than they were during the Cold War. And so Ann Coulter doesn't have a place to belong, right? What is she going to do, right? I mean, during the Bush years, her whole thing, like she said, they should give the death penalty to this one guy, so liberals know that they can get the death penalty too, and that liberals are traitors, and and like, I think there was a congressman who fought in Vietnam, and John Murtha, and she said that he should have fragging, John Murtha is why they invented fragging, like he should have been killed as a traitor because he was questioning the war in Iraq, and she's just this, if you don't like it here, if you're one of those troublemaking leftists, you should be killed. You should, you're a traitor to your country. The leftists are all treasonous. We should investigate the leftists. That's what she's about, right? And that shit ain't flying in conservative circles no more. The conservatives are the ones being accused of being Russian agents. The conservatives are the ones accused of spreading conspiracy theories and undermining our faith in the apparatus. So what a conservative is in our time, it doesn't compute, right? I mean, Ann Coulter can't be a Trump Republican, because Trump Republicans are against the wars. They're against the government. They're against the establishment. And she's trying. I give her points. She A for effort, Ann. But she can't pull it off because of the fact that when it really gets down to it, her entire mindset is about pleasing her FBI dad. Her dad was a leftist hunter. Her dad was a professional anti-communist, a masculine police state guy, and that's her whole orientation. That's what it's about. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on Ann Coulter. You can take that to the bank. I think I'm right? I've been doing this a while, and there you go. This is why people watch this, right? I got Ann Coulter's number, got Kamala Harris's number, got Donald Trump's number, got Bill Clinton's number, got Barack Obama's number. I'm here, personality theory, by studying personalities, by understanding the way people think. Like I said, I tweeted out today, it's great being a malignant narcissist. You should try it sometime. No, I'm joking, honestly. But the reason I say that is because anyway, your theories on the UFO being psyops from the ruling class. I have no idea what's going on with the UFO thing, to be honest. I really don't know, right? I do know UFOs show up in American culture over and over and over again. It's just a thing, especially since the end of the Second World War. Especially since the end of the Second World War. People in America have been talking about UFOs, and it's just a thing we do in America. I mean, it's just part of what it means to be an American. We talk about UFOs all the time. We think UFOs are there. We think UFOs are... It's just, the UFO thing, when it first happened, it was an example of kind of schizophrenic, it was the trauma of World War II, right? Is that we'd had the Great Depression. Remember the Great Depression? People were starving in the streets, and then we had this nightmare called World War II that ended with atomic bombs and all kinds of people dying. And then all of a sudden the economy was really good all across America. Everything was normal. Everything was normal. But when you have a population of people who've been through a huge, horrendous war, and they've been through people starving in the streets, and then you just say to them, all right, now everything's normal. Now you got your house and your car and everything's fine, and we're all going to pretend to be happy now. It's the good old 1950s, white picket fence, leave it to Beaver. There's going to be a lot of people who, even though everything is suddenly perfect, post-World War II economic boom, suddenly they've got TVs and refrigerators and the economy is good, that trauma is still with people. That trauma is still with people. They're still traumatized from everything they went through. and they can't just accept it. And this is something a lot of people with trauma struggle to do. Things are going well, and they just can't accept it. No, no, no. They're like, where's the catch? Where's the catch? Right? Things can't be going well. No, no, no. There's got to be a catch somewhere. Whenever anything starts going well, they go, no, I can't accept this because of their trauma, right? What they've been through. And if you listen, right, the term flying saucer became popular starting in 1947. People across America started seeing flying saucers. Now, obviously, I think there were some people that probably saw something for real, and we don't know what that was. But there were also people that were hallucinating. There were people that were seeing shit that wasn't there, okay? And that often happens, right? There's a few people that maybe saw something, they didn't know what it was. We do understand, there's whistleblowers now. There was something going on that we don't know about. But in addition to that, once that got out there, a lot of people just started hallucinating, right? There's a lot of people who think they see UFOs that are just wacky, right? That's not to say there haven't been people who saw real things, right? I mean, we do know that there were things out there. We don't know what they were. But then there's a lot of people that just, because of their own mental illness or whatever, they're seeing things that aren't there. And if you listen, there was a bluegrass song that came out in 1947, right? As the flying saucer craze was happening. All across America, people were seeing flying saucers. It's a bluegrass song. You'd better pray to the Lord when you see those flying saucers. Could be the coming of the judgment day. It's a sign, there's no doubt, that there's trouble that's about. So if you see them, boy, you better start to pray. Right? All across America, people were seeing flying saucers. Well, if you listen to that song, and that song was interpreting it, first of all, now whenever we think of UFOs, we think aliens. Well, not necessarily. It just means something unidentified flying object, UFO, something in the sky, you don't know what it is, right? I mean, the aliens thing, that's Hollywood, right? No one said it was aliens. But there's things in the sky, people don't know what they are. If there's something in the sky and you don't know what it is, it's an unidentified flying object, right? Well, people started seeing flying saucers across America. A lot of people thought they were angels or thought they were the end times or demons or whatever, right? Well, that song, that popular country bluegrass song that was all over the radio in the United States, you better pray to the Lord if you see those flying saucers. One of the last verses of the song goes like this. And though the war may be true, I won't sing it. I'm just going to tell it to you. Though the war may be through, there's unrest and trouble brewing. And those flying saucers may be just a sign that if peace doesn't come, it'll be the end of some. So repent today. We're running out of time. Now, that says it all right there. Though the war may be through, right? Right there. Right? That's the trauma of World War II. That's, okay, fine. Yeah, fine. World War II is over, Great Depression's over, but we're still in the mindset of we're about to have a war. There's unrest and trouble brewing. Flying saucers may be just a time that it's the trauma of war. It's fear of nuclear war. It's fear of it's nuclear anxiety. It's fear of nuclear war. That's what it was, right? And that the post World War II flying saucer craze was very much, it was a traumatized population dealing with nuclear anxiety, dealing with the trauma of war. They couldn't deal with it. Now, later, the UFO thing became a part of the 1960s counterculture. Later, right? The hippies, there was a lot of UFO stuff going on with hippies, and they thought people on other planets were, going to bring peace to the world, and, it became part of the hippie thing. In the 90s, there was kind of a UFO revival. There was that show that was really popular, the X-Files, right? And the U.S. culture, U.S. society, we've been doing the UFO thing a long time. Look, Mormonism. There are aspects of the Mormon teaching. That very much seem to reference UFOs, or there's the Islamic tradition. I think at one point, doesn't the Prophet Muhammad, some of the hadiths describe like a disc in the sky or something. I mean, it's something that's in the psyche of the culture, right? It's out there, right? And I mean, it's always going to be out there, right? So there you go. Those are my thoughts on the UFO thing. So, I think that it's a distraction more than anything. I mean, I think that there are things in the sky that people don't know what they are. Some of it, I don't know if you all remember. Do you remember when they tried to blame UFOs on Stalin? Do you remember this? When they tried to blame the UFOs on Stalin? That was utterly ridiculous. They tried to say that Stalin had like sent midgets to the United States in an airplane to look like. That was ridiculous. That was utterly ridiculous. And this book, they put it everywhere. It was all over the news. Jon Stewart did a show about it. Everybody, they really, right after Obama came to office, the CIA, I am convinced American intelligence decided, all right, we're going to blame UFOs on Stalin. And it was stupid and ridiculous. And they published this awful book that was circulated. They tried to say that the UFOs were caused by Stalin, that Stalin had gotten midgets from the Soviet Union and put them in a flying disc and sent them here to cause mass panic as a military tactic, as a psychological operation. It was the dumbest thing, and it was like one of the most cockamamie, ridiculous things. And it goes to show you that if mainstream media promotes it, they will say anything, right? I mean, I couldn't have thought of a dumber story if I tried. But, because mainstream media was promoting this, because obviously American intelligence was trying to psych people up about Russia, trying to maybe put the whole UFO thing to rest. I don't know why. They decided to run with this. UFOs were Stalin's fault. It was one of the dumbest things I have seen in some time. It was really, really dumb. Really, really, really dumb. Really, 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 really dumb. It was dumb. It was pretty dumb. It was pretty dumb. Pretty dumb. But they did it. They really tried to blame UFOs on Stalin. They tried to blame UFOs on Stalin. And that was pretty dumb. The other thing that's interesting, and this is just like some random communist trivia, right? We all love random communist trivia. Why not? And hey, if people have got more questions, right, just keep it going, right? I mean, I've been on here for 2 hours and counting, right? So hey, great. You know what I mean? Just keep this going. But one thing that I don't know, do people remember the UFO Trotskyists? The UFO Trotskyists, remember them? The Posadites, the Posadists, right? There was a group of Trotskyists who believed that UFOs were proof that socialism existed on other planets. Yeah, that was something special. The UFO Trotskyites. Who doesn't love the UFO Trotskyites, right? Yeah, there were UFO Trotskyites at one point. And there's a Trotskyite sect that, based in Argentina, led by Posada. I can't remember his first name, and you can read their writings. I mean, they have all kinds of pamphlets about how UFOs and Trotskyism go together. It's pretty sad, pretty silly. So you have that. Apparently, they tried to set up shop in Cuba at one point, and they were attacking foreign embassies in Cuba because they believed that they could spark World War III, and that would make the aliens come down. So there you go. The UFO Trotskyists. But anything else on people's minds? This is a great run, right? This is great, right? I haven't had a stream like this for a long time. People are asking great questions. A lot of people in the chat. This is like one of the best streams I've had in a long time, and it was random. It's weird. I promote streams for 24 hours, and barely anybody shows up. And here I am. I just randomly decide to hop on YouTube right after the Republican debate. I just randomly decide to hop on YouTube. I still got my suit on from when I'm broadcasting about it, and everyone's asking me questions. Great, right? Hey, anything else people want to know about, right? I know it's late. It's late here in Brooklyn, but, hey, I'm having a great time. I'm just freestyling here, right? I didn't even come on here with a plan. I just started freestyling about the Republican debate. You all started asking me questions. This is great. Any more questions people want to ask me? Anything else on people's minds? Maybe I should wear a suit more often, right? Maybe that's the secret. I need to wear a suit. That's what I see people in the chat saying. Anything else on people's minds tonight? Anything else on people's minds? Anything else people would like to talk about? I'm all ears. Anything else? If not, we can start to move toward wrapping this up, right? I'm all for wrapping things up when it's time. But this has been a great stream, and maybe we should do more random streams. I'm doing it on my phone. Maybe that's something to do with it. I'm doing it from my phone rather than from my computer, from my webcam. So maybe that helps somehow. That's interesting. But yeah, I'm doing this on my phone, and it seems to be working. So there you go, right? There you go. Social media is rigged. It is absolutely rigged. Social media is completely rigged. In case you have any thoughts on it, any thoughts, any doubts about it, social media is 100% rigged. It is absolutely, positively rigged. And do not doubt it for a minute. We have the Twitter files. We know that the FBI is sitting down there with Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and telling them what to promote and what not to promote. It is absolutely rigged. Social media is rigged. And don't you doubt it for a minute. It is absolutely, absolutely rigged. It is absolutely rigged. And because it's rigged, we can only go so far. And that we're, Center for Political Innovation, we're building a real organization, right? We are building a real organization. And that is exactly what the riggers don't want to happen, right? And that's why look, I'm not going to name names, but there are certain people who have taken the concepts that we talk about on here and repackaged them, and they're not building any organization, and they've blown up really big. And there's a reason for that, right? I mean, you should not have any doubt as to why that is happening, right? That's obviously planned, right? And that those people, for a while they were friendly to me, and then they were hostile to me, and this is planned. The ruling class absolutely does not want there to be real organizations of people doing real shit. But that is what I am committed to doing. And that's what this new book, Letter to Bob Avakian, is about, right? More than anything, right? Even though I'm contrasting my views with his, Letter to Bob Avakian is very much, very, very much, it is about building a movement. Everyone who's read the book so far, which is not many people, but those who've read it so far, it's not published yet, they love it. And they say, wow, I didn't expect it to go where it went. You took this in so many different places. You did something really special with this book. I talk about a lot of different things in there, and the end really surprises people. It really surprises people, the very, very, very end of the new book. So keep your eyes out for the Letter to Bob Avakian book. It's already creating a stir. I am excited to publish it. I'm very, very, very excited to publish the book. I've had it in me for a long time, and it was finally time to just get it out there. I am convinced that it may not be an immediate hit, but the idea is that anyone who starts researching Bob Avakian will come across my stuff. Will come across our mission as the Center for Political Innovation, because we are on a mission. We are on a mission. We are on a mission, and we're trying to get some stuff done. All right, since we're here, since we're on here right now, I'm talking to all of you. I don't know if you all saw Lefty Poll. Lefty Poll, I just want to strangle these people sometimes. Obviously, I don't advocate and want to carry out violence against anybody, but Lefty Poll, right? Where have they been? Where have they been? Okay, so today, Manson and the MK Ultra connection. All right, we'll talk about that. All right, but let me finish this point. Lefty Poll, right? So like today, yesterday, they tweet out, oh my God, Caleb joined the Moonies. I haven't joined the Moonies. I'm friends with the Moonies, and I've been friends with the Moonies for months. For months. I mean, we first approached the Moonies well over a year ago. And the reason is they want peace with North Korea. They want peace with North Korea. And, the Center for Political Innovation, we reached out to them. And all these people are tweeting out, oh my God, the CPI dissolved and then he joined the Moonies. First of all, I haven't joined the Moonies, number one. And number two, it's not a secret. I did a podcast with Reverend Milhan Stevens back in May, and we talked about how we're working together for peace on the Korean Peninsula. It's old news, folks. It is old news, right? That in 1991, Reverend, and it's and they're tweeting out, oh, he doesn't know they're anti-communist. Of course I know they're anti-communist. in 1991, Reverend Sun Myung Moon went to North Korea and reconciled with Kim Il Sung. And they had a meeting. And since then, the Unification Church has been one of the strongest advocates of peace talks and negotiations with North Korea. That is a fact. For a long time, the state with the Unification Church, you can Google it, right? That they ran the state-run car company in North Korea. They were licensed by the American government to do business there, right? Yes, they were a very anti-communist religious group, and I have not joined them because my beliefs and theirs don't line up, right? They're against communism. I believe in communism. You know, they're very, very against gay marriage. I think that gay marriage is okay, right? I don't have an issue with gay people getting married. It doesn't bother me in any way. You know, our beliefs don't line up. But I have been friendly with them, and they are trying to build a peace movement to some degree or other. They had a march May 27th for peace, unity, and reconciliation. I went to the march, Center for Political Innovation. We attended the march, and we put a video of it on the internet. There's nothing surprising about any of this. I've been completely open and honest about this for a long time. And I see Lefty Poll just finally caught on to this. Oh my God. And it's like, first of all, I haven't joined the Moonies, right? It's not my religion, not my religious beliefs. But I'm happy to talk to them about how we can have peace on the Korean Peninsula. And you all, again, if anyone was paying attention, you might recall that there is a Korean American organization that also works for peace on the Korean Peninsula, so they say. And the Center for Political Innovation very friendly reached out to them, and they told us not to come to their rally. And I showed the email on this stream. They told us not to come, for Christ's sakes. So how in the world can you blame me for, there's a religious group that will work with the Center for Political Innovation. There's a leftist Korean group that we reached out to that doesn't want us there. Betsy Yoon emailed me, I'm not comfortable with you at the rally. Cancel culture, internet rumors, sex gossip, blah, 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 blah. So they don't want us there. Well, and this is what I don't understand. Leftists are, I've seen this over and over again, right? Leftists hate my guts. They call me a Nazi, they call me a white supremacist, they call me every evil thing. But then every time I talk to somebody who's not a leftist, they get all hoity-toity. Oh, how can he do that? Well, you don't want me. You don't want me. Right? So why shouldn't I talk to them, right? If Notatal, the socialist leftist Korean organization, it's controlled by the Party of Socialism and Liberation, if they don't want to cooperate with us around peace on the Korean Peninsula, why shouldn't I cooperate with the Unification Church around it? I'm not going to join Notatal because I'm not Korean. I'm not going to join the Unification Church because those are not my religious beliefs. But I am going to work for peace on the Korean Peninsula, right? And these toxic leftists, right, they just want me to disappear. They just want me to go away and fade into nothing. I ain't going to do that. And there's a lot of people. We have 111 members of the Center for Political Innovation right now. We're dedicated to working for peace. And if the Unification Church will work with us for peace on the Korean Peninsula, we'll work with them. And I'm not ashamed of that. And the same with the LaRouche organization. They're widely called a cult. They're widely hated, but I've worked with them before because they want to work for peace with Russia and China. People don't get it. Like, the need to stop World War III is so urgent right now. Anybody in the United States who's organizing peace rallies, peace marches, peace with Russia, peace with China, peace with North Korea, I want something to do with them. I do, right? And the communist groups have basically declared themselves to be irrelevant because they're boycotting all peace marches that they don't control. Right? You know, the Rage Against the War Machine rally happened, sponsored by the People's Party, the Libertarian Party. We were there. CPI was a big part of it. You know, we did a great reception afterwards with Scott Ritter. It was awesome. But these folks weren't there. Right? The PSL did their tiny rally a month later, less than 1,000 people there. It was ridiculous. It was tiny, it was small, it was irrelevant, right? The so-called communists, they are so captured by this insane cancel culture, they will not protest with anyone who doesn't meet like a woke criteria, right? So basically, if we want to build a movement to stop World War III, we have to work with people who aren't left, because the left is dead. The left is toxic. It's that simple. So, Libertarian Party, I'll work with them. Happy to work with them. Angela McCurdle, chair of the Libertarian Party, Mises Caucus, I consider her a friend, right? People's Party, Nick Brana, good friend of mine. Love him, right? Reverend Milhan Stevens, Unification Church. Again, he organized an amazing peace march on May 27th, a religious peace march. I marched 25, 30 CPI libertarian folks. We marched and joined the march. And I would do that again. And I love them. They're good folks. I attend their services Sunday morning. Not ashamed of it at all. And the cancel culture, like, they're good. That community has been subjected to a lot of demonization, and they've been treated unfairly over the years, and I'll say that much. Okay, so now we've got a couple super chats that have come in. Now, the next thing people want me to talk about is they want me to talk about Manson and the MK Ultra CIA connection. So there's a book that's been published that was like a best-selling book that was widely circulated on that question, that talks about how when Charles Manson was in prison, they were doing LSD experiments on him. They were letting him do his parole hearings at a clinic that was tied to MK Ultra experiments, and that there was a CIA agent in Hollywood who was on speaking terms, was friendly with a number of people. After Charles Manson did his murders, that CIA agent tried to, frame things, around the Manson killings in a very political way to serve kind of a government crackdown on leftist voices. That's kind of what the book gets at. It also says that Charles Manson didn't intend to kill Sharon Tate. He thought he was killing a rival drug dealer. I think Tom O'Neill is the author, and it's called Chaos: Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 1960s. It's a great book. I recommend you read it. And it talks about how Charles Manson should have gone back to prison, but there was somebody protecting him. It talks about a lot of aspects of Charles Manson's life that indicate that he was being used for experiments by the intelligence agencies, their MK Ultra LSD experiments, and on top of that, that the story, the narrative of the Charles Manson murders that we have is a very, very highly politicized narrative that he was a drugged out nut. One thing I will say about Charles Manson, right? If he hadn't been in Hollywood, if that guy hadn't been in Hollywood, no one would have ever heard of him, right? And people look at the Charles Manson case, they're like, oh, it's a case, it's a cult, and all that. No, drug dealer who gives drugs to women and gets them addicted so he can have sex with them. That is like one of the most common things in the criminal underworld that has ever happened, right? The Manson family, you look at it, it's like, this isn't a cult. This is just some kind of drugged up criminal underworld horror movie, right? And it's just, this is, the amount of drug dealing criminal guys who have a lot of girlfriends because they get women addicted to drugs and then gain control over them. How many people in this world? That's like, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of Charles Mansons, right? The only reason that Charles Manson is famous is because he's in Hollywood, because he killed a Hollywood movie star, and that one thing that just infuriates me, the amount of Charles Manson interviews that I have seen, right? They really wanted Charles Manson to be this like criminal mastermind, this satanic evil genius. They did so many interviews where they just sat down with him and he blathered like a fucking fool. He's a blathering idiot. He's like, oh, Charles Manson, blah, 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 blah. He's a blathering idiot. The guy's a lunatic. He's a drugged out nut job. He's incoherent. The interviews are gibberish. And it's like so many times the TV would sit down with him. All right, from prison, we have Charles Manson. It was like every 10 years he would do another big, like, hour-long sit-down conversation with Ted Koppel or Tom Snyder or one of these people. And, they're unwatchable. The guy was a blathering idiot. He was an utter blathering idiot. He was a drug-dealing criminal who had a lot of women who were dependent on him because of drugs, and so he used them to go kill somebody for him. And the person he killed happened to be a movie star. And according to this book by Tom O'Neill, he didn't even know it was a movie star. And so it blew up and it became a famous thing. And it's like, oh my God, the Manson killings. And they used it to kind of demonize hippies. It was Nixon was trying to justify the drug wars and the crackdown. And, you know, it had political purposes in the United States. Nixon was fighting the synthetic left and it was complicated. So because of that, the Manson thing has become this big thing. It's not really that important of a story. It's really not that important of a story. The more you look into it, like there's, you know, anywhere that you have lumpen criminal elements, you've got a Charles Manson. You've got some guy who uses drugs to control people and wants to fight his rivals. I mean, it's really not, you know, the narco world of Latin America is far more deadly. Far more people die in the drug wars down there. There's far more Charles Mansons out there. You know, I mean, you know, the Manson case is really, it's really not that profound when you really look at it. But what was the other question people had? There was another super chat question that came in, and I'm starting to fade here, so I should probably wrap this up. Simon Hunt says there will be a global depression by 2025. What do you think? Well, my friend, we are already in a long-term capitalist crisis because of overproduction, because of artificial intelligence. Human labor creates all wealth. When human beings are reduced, the role in production is greatly decreased. The result is a long-term economic crisis. Marxism explains that great leaps in technology in a capitalist system where profits are in command and profits dictate production lead to long-term economic crisis. That is the nature of the capitalist system. Well, that means that artificial intelligence and the computer revolution have created a long-term capitalist crisis. And that as a result, you know, the financial crisis of the 2000s hasn't ended, right? I mean, you know, and that we're in a long-term capitalist crisis. And it can only really be resolved by having central planning of the means of production. And in this book, I quote, I didn't make this stuff up, right? I quote very heavily 3 other books that I would recommend you read that have the exact same thesis as my book. And those 3 books are The Future is Up to Us by Nelson Peary, Low Wage Capitalism by Fred Goldstein, and High Tech, Low Pay by Sam Marcy. And those 3 books all say exactly what I say in my book, which is that technology and automation has reached new levels because of the computer revolution. It's leading to a long-term capitalist crisis. That, you know, the Communist Manifesto talks about all this, that, you know, that capitalism creates a crisis that would have seemed absurd in any other system. People become homeless because there are too many houses. People become homeless. People become hungry because there's too much food. The coal miner's riddle, right? That this is the built-in problem of capitalism. Capitalism is a system of production organized for profit, and it's highly irrational. And there are big sections of the world that have broken out of it, like China, like Vietnam, like Cuba, like Venezuela, like Nicaragua. And as this new block of anti-imperialist countries centered around the BRICS and all of that emerges, Western capitalism is on the defensive more than ever. And the only way they can try to save their system is with degrowth. That's called fascism. And the lower levels of the capitalist class, they don't want degrowth. And so there's a conflict in the capitalist class. All of this is in my book. Right? This is a unique understanding that we have, but it's not really that unique. This is, you know, I mean, this is standard Marxism. Standard Marxism. Another book I recommend that people read if they want to understand this is Fascism and Social Revolution by R. Palm Dutt. Right? Another great book. This one's a lot older. It came out during the Depression, and it explains all of this, right? And that's what's happening in our time. Long-term capitalist crisis rooted in the technological leaps, creating a crisis of overproduction and the tendency of the falling rate of profits. The solution is a centrally planned economy. The solution is public ownership, rational control of the means of production. So there you go, folks. All right, well, I guess I'll just start to wrap this up then. It's been a great stream. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Thanks, everybody, and good night.